Well, work may have interrupted my first attempt at the recording a few seconds in, but I'm not gonna let the bad news of that sour my mood. Instead, I'm gonna talk about an awesome episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, an awesome four-parter. Should be more clear. So, these 4 episodes. I have to admit, I have to admit that it I find it funny. I kind of find it funny that that this arc has been as awesome for me to watch as it has been. Because historically, I've never really thought about this arc as being the best arc of the show. I've never really thought of it that way. Not really. Really. And yet, here we are. I know I'm gonna get eaten alive for not going with the crowd and declaring Battle City the best arc ever. But I'm sorry, of the canon arcs, Battle City doesn't cut it. Especially Battle City without Alcatraz Island, as I had, as I pointed out, uh, as I talked about with all of the, during my Sinister Secrets video, right? Right? Battle City without Alcatraz is only a 50.24%. It only scored 50.24%. And with Alcatraz itself scoring 59.13, and them being combined, I mean, being only 53.06. Alcatraz boost Battle City a little bit, but not by enough to warrant it. And hell, I'm not even that impressed with Alcatraz's score or by itself. I actually do stand behind Doma and the Virtual World arc being better than Battle City. Hitty, bar none. Hun, you know? Oh, in fact, I'm only going to be generous, and in fact, I'm being generous when I include Alcatraz on there because that's the only way it actually beats the KC Grand Prix, in my opinion, is together. Because in my opinion, the weakest season is season 2. Battle City, though, I don't think you can just leave season 2 as the complete package of Battle City. I don't think you can quite go that far, you know? I do think you need Alcatraz Tower to as part of Battle City because it is part of Battle City. There's a reason why the dub calls the first 3 episodes of the Alcatraz Tower stuff as Return to Battle City because that's what the show is doing, right? So now we have the Dark One cometh. So yeah, the what's funny is that I only have 6 episodes left of the show past this point. So yeah, it is very likely that we will be starting. We will be starting the. Whatchamacallit? We will be starting the final. We will be starting the final. The final stretch. Right. From my perspective, I'm going to end the Zorc stuff today. I'm actually going to get one more episode done because to watch it is only going to be like an hour, and then of course the video on it, which is the episode entitled "Name of the in the Name of the Pharaoh," which is the name of it in both versions. Fun fact. The only difference is that the sub has 2 exclamation marks and and the dub doesn't because the dub doesn't really add exclamation marks. Generally speaking, episode titles only really have exclamation marks when it's in Japanese, right? Because they're meant to be titles. They're meant to be expressions of what an episode is, right? That's why a lot of titles kind of, are stuff like, like Zorc Resurrects, and just to use the examples of this very episode, Zorc Resurrects, Legendary Protector Exodia Resurrects, Summon the Three Gods, and Zorc versus Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, right? Right. Granted, a lot of my titles are like that, but then again, I grew up watching anime, so I suppose that tracks. It's actually funny because when anime is translated into English titles, that usually kind of carries forward, right? Right. Some memes have actually joked about that, right? Will Frieza be defeated? Find out today on Dragon Ball Z. Title of the episode is Frieza defeated. Yeah. All right. Where to begin? I think where I want to start is right when Zorc resurrects. Right when Zorc resurrects, Kareem's body kind of gets buried in the rubble, and Isis is about to go to him, and Shimon has to stop her. Like, no, we gotta go. Oh, and she tries to go back for Kareem's body, and I'm just sitting there like, my dear, come on now. We should we can retrieve his body when we're not about to die. I mean, I get the mentality, but it's kind of an example of panicking at the wrong time, right? The worst possible freak out. I mean, I actually have some thoughts on stuff like, say, episode 24 of Death Note, and a particular scene that even I've memed on a little bit, right? But regardless of any of that, it, I think what makes me appreciate this four-parter specifically is the fact that despite stuff like ISIS being dumb and yada yada yada, there's a very quick pace to everything, but it doesn't feel like it's too fast, like it's rushing through crap. It feels more like this is just the right length, right? It is just long enough that you feel the tension, but not so long that the tension, where you're just sitting there like, okay, you're holding the tension too long, right? And I think that's very important to distinguish, because let me tell you, these 4 episodes didn't feel like 4 episodes to me. They felt like two. Ew. 2 to 3 episodes, right? Now, obviously, I know they're 4 episodes because, as I've heard overlap 4 times today. Hey, hey, technically 5, but let's not split hairs. I've heard, in the past 4 episodes, I heard overlap 4 times. I let Eyes play like twice because I actually skipped over Eyes a couple of times just to get to the next part, because it was like, I gotta get to the next part. Oh, and and the funny thing about these 4 episodes is it doesn't feel like it drags on, right? I'm not wishing for them to just focus exclusively on Yugi versus Yami Bakura. I'm not wanting them to focus exclusively on Zorc. In fact, what's funny is you would think the cutting back and forth between the duel between Yugi and Yami Bakura and the actual battle against Zorc would actually piss me off, because it keeps flip-flopping. And yet, I don't feel like that's a problem in this case because of the Masterstrokes hoax. Because here's the thing. Okay, they play a few turns of the Yugi versus Bakura stuff. And then they cut back to the efforts to defeat Zorc. And each time we cut back and forth between the battle with Zorc and the duel, each section feels like it lasts just long enough that that the tension still holds, right? And considering that a lot of the cutaways to the battle with Zorc is a Tem losing, that's actually why they intersperse it with turns in the duel versus Yamabakura of Yugi winning. And that's, I think, a very important distinction, because pacing is not just the flow of events. And it's right. It can be, the pacing can be all about the flow of events. Yes, can all be about it, but in this case, it feels like the story sequencing, how the episodes string each of their scenes into each other and stitch them together. It is masterfully done. Even in the dub. Though, let's face it, that's because the sub actually did the masterstroke, and the dub was just kind of dancing around, was just playing around with the masterstroke. It's also why the sub got the point for all 4 points. Because, again, I keep hammering this point in. I don't hate this arc in the dub. I like this arc in the dub. I have always liked this arc in the dub. But the sub is just crushing it. No joke, this arc has had, I want to say, 5 episodes so far that have been preferred in the dub. Give me a second to confirm that. Yes, 5 episodes that have been preferred in the dub. With those 5 episodes being... I have to flip through quite a bit to find the first one. The first one was Reversal of Fortune. That was the Time Rewind episode. Then In Search of the King was a dub, and then 3 parts of Village of Vengeance got the point for the dub. Specifically, parts 3, 4, and 5 of Village of Vengeance got points for the dub. Everything else has been the sub, and this was no exception. So, yeah, I hate to say this. But the sub wins the preference, by the way. This 4-parter cemented the sub's win. It is physically impossible for the dub to overtake the sub in points. And, fun fact, it is also completely impossible for the dub to even tie the sub in points now. Physically impossible. Because remember, only 6 points of opportunity are left. And I have a funny feeling the sub is not going... and even if I did count the movies, which I kind of haven't been, then again, and Pyramid of Light was the only movie we've covered, I've thought about whether or not I actually want to count Dark Side of Dimensions towards the points between the sub and the dub. But fun fact, that's the best the dub can manage now is to use D-Saw to tie the score. That's it. That's the best it can hope for. And I've seen bits and pieces of the ceremonial duel in the sub. Yeah, I don't think the dub is getting all 4 points for the ceremonial duel. I'm sorry to say that. right? There's only one point that I am anticipating is going to be given to the dub, and that is, of course, part 1, and that's all because of Yugi. The true test will now begin! Because I have always fucking loved that line. But I digress. Yes, you know. So Zorc has finally arrived. We'll talk about him being the creator of the Shadow Realm actually later. There's actually a point later that I can talk about it. It's actually in my part 4 notes. And I believe I also wrote out about him claiming to be the darkness itself. Yeah, and then there's a note in part 2 in the sub about Zorc claiming to be the darkness itself. So yeah, we will talk about the whole Zorc Shadow Realm thing. I didn't forget. I almost did, but I didn't forget. It. It. In both versions, Yami Bakura basically says their Zorc can't attack because there's a barrier blocking them from knowing what's going on outside. I kind of have to call bullcrap on that. I think Zorc is just leaving the tomb alone because as part of him is dueling Yugi. I don't think they're safe from Zorc. I think they're effectively dueling Zorc because both the sub and the dub basically point blank say in this episode that Yami Bakura is Zorc. They confirm that 1000% right now, you know, which makes the whole point, which makes the one thing not make much sense. The one scene from earlier in the arc not make much sense. But to be fair, to quote Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged, there's 5 Yami Bakuras ringing around in this arc when you really sit back and think about it. Because there's Game Master Bakura, there's Tristan Bakura, there's Thief King Bakura. Let's see. So Game Master Bakura, Tristan Bakura, Thief King Bakura, Zorc, who's wanting to be resurrected. Where's the 5th one? What's the 5th one? Well, I guess like plain Thief King Bakura, because there's possessed Thief King Bakura, unpossessed Thief King Bakura, or Game Master Bakura, Tristan Bakura, and then Zorc himself. So yeah, 5. There you go. But that's beside the point. Do I want to talk about the duel? Do I want to talk about the duel as a whole now and then save the Zorc stuff for after? You know what? Yeah, let's cover the duel in one big chunk now. There's some interesting cards that both players use. Doom Caliber Knight, which I haven't actually, I forgot to look up if that was a real card. Because I looked up a bunch of the other ones. There's very few non-anime exclusive cards in this duel, by the way. Very few. And what's funny is that there are anime, or well, I should say like anime slash manga exclusive versions of certain monsters, like Silent Swordsman and Silent Magician. We'll get to cool boy and Yugi's cool older brother and fucking waifu monsters a bit later. Don't you worry. We can't avoid talking about Silent Swordsman and Silent Magician in this thing. Also, yeah, Silent Magician is, when have you seen level level 8 Silent Magician? Granted, she's not going to have them hips until until literally the final episode, but that's beside the point. Who? Uh, and then of course Yugi uses marshmallow. And in the dub, Bakura is like, "Is that a monster or a dessert topping?" God. In the sub, he's just like, "Oh, that's an annoying monster." God, I love Ted Lewis. Ted Lewis is like the best thing that happened to this franchise. Considering how many good interesting characters he has voiced over the years, that's pretty impressive. That's the Bakura, Bandit Keith, Jack Atlas, and those are just the big ones. There's a bunch of like lower end ones too. Ew. Uh, so Yugi's animation for his draw is epic. Epic. They fight and they fight and they fight. There's some good back and forth in the duel. Zoma the trap monster Zoma the Spirit is actually used. I didn't I didn't realize when I had shown this in an earlier video, that monster in an earlier video. I forgot Yami Bakura used it. Full confession, I forgot he used it here. So, yeah, he's setting up. He's setting up. Then Bakura gets rid of his graveyard with the curse from those doll presents, and Joey hides behind Taya. Taya. Anzu calls Janochi pathetic, and Taya bitches out Joey by saying, and do I look like a human shield to you? And Joey's just like, are you not gonna lie to you, Taya? Yes, you do. The dub has some funny lines, okay? I'm not gonna lie about that. So it's all part of Bakura's undead luck strategy. Yugi whips out Silent Magician. Hey guys, it's Alex from the editing room yet again. So apparently I didn't talk about the Silent Swordsman or Silent Magician uh monsters at all in this video. Oh my god, how could I fuck this up? I just wanted to jump in here and alleviate your fears. During the ceremonial duel, I will make a note, both mentally and in my actual notebook, to actually talk about it. This is literally a crush card scenario where I just glaze over it, and I am very embarrassed by that. So yeah, I will fix it during final duel. Just wanted to bring that up so that the comments didn't explode with that. So, all right, back to it. Mission, which ultimately kind of forces Yugi to discard his entire deck, pretty much his entire deck, getting him down to just one monster left in his deck, one card left in his deck, and it's Gandora, the Dragon of Destruction. Oh hell yeah! Now, obviously, it's only the anime version that would work this way uh, because of its effect. I'm actually gonna look up Gandora's effect to read it out. Obviously, future Alex is of course going to put Gandora up on screen for you, but I'm actually gonna read out his effect. So, if you'll forgive the indulgence here. So, first of all, he can't be special summoned. You can pay half of your life points to destroy as many cards on the field as possible other than this card. And if you do, you banish them. This card gains 300 attack for each card destroyed this way. Once per turn during the end phase, if this card was normal or flip summoned this turn, you send it to the graveyard. So really, in essence, what would have happened there is Gandora would have gained the attack point, enough attack points means to attack in the real card game. Bakura would have had all those monsters be all those cards be destroyed, which also would have included the dolls. By the way, that would have included the dolls, the narrow passageway trap, yep, the nec the that necrocycle card card and counterbalance. Those four cards would have went to the graveyard along with his mannequin, necro mannequin, and necro wall. Oh, plus the I want to say it's like the 9 other monsters that are floating around as well because they're on the field as ghosts, right? So those 9 other cards, effectively, that would mean like 11 to 13 monsters all going pop, cards all going pop, and Gandora would get 300 points for each, which means his attack would jump up to, at a minimum, at an absolute minimum, uh, with the Necro Wall, the Necro Mannequins, which I actually think there were 2 Necro Mannequins there. So the 2 Necro Mannequins, well, you know what? Well, no, there was only 2 because he destroyed one. The 2 Necro Mannequins and the Necro Wall, oh, plus those four speller traps that I mentioned. So that'd be 7. So that'd be 2,100 points. Now I don't remember how much he had at the end. Give me a second. I'm actually gonna look this up real quick, because I'm on the page, so I might as well. Oh, jeez, it wouldn't have mattered. He only had 200. That's right. He only had 200 life points left because he sacked a bunch of life points. It's for Necrojar. Never mind. My math was completely pointless. Go figure. Go figure. My God, I've already been talking for 27 minutes. I'm talking about this episode longer than White Dragon. God damn. Again, I suppose, no, even with looking it up, because that only took like a minute. Huh. But yeah, yeah, Gandora uses its boundless Giga Rays to destroy the undead lock. Yugi is victorious. We actually repeat the final turn, by the way. Hey, in part 4, because Yugi summons Gandora, and that ends part 3. But we actually replay that like partway through part 4. It's a little weird, but you know what? I'm willing to let that one pass. Yes. Yes. So the gang get out of the tomb. They confront Bakura's frickin' dark, evil rider henchmen, jerks, and then they use the power of thought. Excuse me. They use the power of thought not only to summon dual discs so they can fight back, just like Bakura did to challenge Yugi, but also use the power of thought so they can start flying towards Tem so they can give him his name. Because, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, we've got bigger fish to fry, guys. Let's save this for later. Blue Wolf should take his own advice because as he's unwrapping a thing that came in for him today. Anywho, moving on. So meanwhile, while all that duel action, that awesome duel action is going on where Yugi is proving he doesn't need a Tem, him constantly on his shoulder. If anything, to be honest, I got to be honest with you. I actually do think it's the other way around. I think a Tem gets more out of Yugi, coaching him during duels. Being his being the companion and watching over his duels, right? It's why I've always liked the merge idea. They both get as good as they give, right? So Zorc is a walking plague. Hague, Hague, and he's also censored. So okay, Zorc's design. I can understand why they censored Zorc. Okay, because let's face it, Zorc is a giant bipedal demon with a dragon wang. In case you missed that, Zorc is a demon who walks around naked with a dragon head for a wang. Yeah, of course they're gonna fucking censor Zorc. Come on now. Hell, they even are kind of creative with the way they do it, because the way they do it is they shade Zorc so that effectively his entire midsection is just a glob of darkness. Darkness, right? In some shots you can't tell, which is also why they only kind of censor it. But yeah, in later shots it becomes extremely obvious. Hell, they barely censor it in part 4 too, when Zorc destroys Blue Eyes the first time. But yeah, but more on that later. So Game Master Bakura decides to cheat and goes to end the game immediately. Shadad blocks it and dies. They plan to retrieve the Millennium items, but Isis tells him it tells him, I'll go and I'll retrieve the items to go and do that. Although there is one thing I forgot to mention, because it's actually in part 1, because I am dumb. A couple of things actually. So Game Master Bakura reveals that the future, or the real world as he puts it, because this is just a game world, it is the real world is being affected by the game world. In my blunt opinion, it would have worked better if this was just time travel, because then you could claim that that is literally just the duh of time travel, right? The future is starting to be destroyed because the past is being destroyed. Now you could ask the obvious question of, wouldn't that just be instantaneous? Why would there be disastrous cataclysmic events happening as a result of time travel? You ever heard of the rule of drama? Because that is why. Hi, and you need to stop distracting me. That is why. It's always been for the sake of entertainment, right? Right. Kind of a similar deal with Back to the Future. Why does Marty McFly slowly disappear here instead of just instantaneously, right? I honestly think time travel just would have worked better. I also kind of really like that cutaway at the end of part 1, and the camera cut in part 1 in the sub better, because he's literally going, oof, is there no hope, am I without hope? Cuts to who can give him hope, I actually kind of like that symbolism. So then in part 2, as I said, Isis and Mana decide they're going to go retrieve it. I do like Isis's reasoning. She can actually use Spiria to find the items, which is good. Good. Also, in the sub, Zorc talks about. Also, Seto gives a distraction, so that's cool. Zorc, when Isis is coming back, Zorc actually talks like he's actually kind of concerned about the items, because he says, "Oh, I thought I sensed the Millennium items," and then goes to attack Isis. That makes me think he actually is like thinking there's a chance I could lose if I let the items get back. So he actually tries to destroy Isis, which smart thinking on your part, Zorc. Or considering all the stuff that that Atem and his people managed to do with the items. Items, yeah. So Shimon takes the Millennium Key. He says in the dub that he was the holder of the Millennium Key originally. And I think that's true, because I actually think in the flashback we saw in the Millennium Items creation episode that Shimon was the first wielder of it. So cool. Cool. Of course, Isis dies because she gets blasted by Zorc. And I'll be honest, in the Japanese version, if the title of the episode of part 2 didn't give away that Exodia was about to pop out, had come out, the music would have. Because when the glowing when the symbols start popping up and those for the tablets to start rising out of the ground, it's the same music that started playing when Atem summoned Exodia back in episode 1. That's why I like the music of the sub, by the way. So, Exodia comes out, fights with Zorc. They're on even grounds. Both of them can regenerate, by the way. Although, it's unfortunately more limited with Exodia than it is with Zorc, because Zorc derives his power from the darkness, whereas Exodia is taking his Ka from is the Ka of Shimon, which means he's absorbing the Ba of one human, which, as is pointed out by Zorc in the sub, is finite. Yeah. Exodia tries to use Exodo Flame to destroy him. I am with the flame of anger, but Zorc claims to be the darkness itself. Time to bring up my theory about the Shadow Realm now. My theory about the Shadow Realm is that I think it technically does exist in the Japanese version. Because otherwise, where the fuck are the Game Master Yugi and Game Master Pakura playing? Ain't, right? Right? Oh, they're playing in the corridors of their realm. How does that make any fucking sense? No. This is why I like the Shadow Realm as a concept, because that explains where the hell Yami Bakura and Yami Yugi, the Game Master versions of them, are, and where this Shadow RPG is even being played. My opinion. I love I've always loved the concept of of effectively hell, right? Because again, the Shadow Realm is a very interesting idea. I always feel like the Shadow Realm is kind of a pocket dimension of hell, basically, right? Because there's the world of darkness, and then there's this little pocket of it called the Shadow Realm. No, that is effectively the Nightmare Realm, right? The negative zone, if you prefer. You know, if you understand what that is. A place of madness and hurt and anger and darkness. The very things that Zorc claims to be in their abundance. Obviously, Zorc, as we'll learn throughout the show, he's not the be-all end-all of darkness. But what if he actually was one of the entities that forged the world of darkness? Being one of the demons of the demon, one of the ultimate demons of darkness, instead of the demon of darkness, right? It would actually make the later antagonists, the later big bads, heads like darkness from GX uh and Dawn Thousand make infinitely more sense. You know, just a little food for thought. So then we move on to part 3. So Tem calls out the gods. It's love the animation on it. It's still cool. It's interesting that Tem actually suspected that Yami Bakura was Zorc in the sub, whereas he's actually utterly shocked in the dub. Just kind of an interesting food for thought. Kaiba has to, who in both versions has to pointlessly name all 3 of the gods. The pacing is still excellent, though, despite him doing that, so that's awesome. Also, in the sub, they actually reverse a Tem and Kaiba's dialogue. So our Seto and the Tem say exactly what Atem and Kaiba say. What the other says between Atem and Kaiba from the dub, because one of them says it's about the eclipse specifically, because Tem mentions the eclipse in the sub, Kaiba mentions it in the dub. And then it's the opposite when it's with the other thing. Just kind of a fun little detail that I noticed. And since I already covered the duel, that moves us on to part 4 already. Eddie, because there's not much for me to say. The gods get their asses handed. The god monsters get their asses handed to them. I hate to say it so casually, but it's true. They do. They absolutely do. So Kaiba steps up, and one thing that the sub shows that the dub doesn't is that those victims that are running away from Zorc, not only do they get blasted in the sub, but one of them looks like Mokuba. Which means, yes, Zorc just pushed the Mokuba button. And you know what that means? That means Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon's coming out. Yeah. Zorc identifies Kaiba in the sub, and in the dub, it's more of a mockery. Kaiba's even surprised in the dub that some of the dual disc actually worked. He wasn't sure. I kind of like that. So Blue Eyes Ultimate blasts. Tem comes in to turn Blue Eyes Ultimate into Dragon Master Knight with the Millennium Scales, which means Tem gets to cosplay. Nice. I mean, Yugi got to cosplay, so now it's Tim's turn. And I like that he actually takes on the form of Blackluster Soldier. There's just something appealing about that, you know? Let Yugi have Dark Magician, he'll take Blackluster Soldier. And then Shoddy sacrifices himself to give the gang a chance to arrive. And this is these are the last couple of things we need to talk about. Uh, Actually, before we get to Shoddy, I'm actually going to talk about the nature of light and darkness first, because uh, Zorc says that, darkness existed before light, right? And he's talking about how, in this situation, Atem is the light, and yada, 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 yada. The funny thing is he's actually wrong when you think about it. Darkness and light have always existed together. It is the very nature of the universe. Light cannot exist, one cannot exist without the other. Because if you have darkness without light, well, that's not really darkness at that point, it's the void. Now, some people might say, well, what's the difference? But the difference is that there's nothingness. It's not darkness, it's mu, nothingness. And there is a distinction between the two, because with darkness there is an implication that something is there casting that shadow. But nothingness is just an empty void. But now we got to talk about Shoddy and whether or not he is ultimately the primary antagonist who set these events in motion. Okay. My final stance on this is that, because they do play it up as if the Millennium Puzzle was never solved, he would never wake back up. I have to admit, I don't think that's a viable argument. I think what would have eventually happened is the Millennium Puzzle would have eventually been solved, and Atem would have eventually have woken up, right? It would just happen to be at this point in time with this particular descendant of Atem's, who happened to look exactly like him, but let's not split hairs. That is ultimately what was going to play out regardless. I don't think Shoddy did all of this out of maliciousness. I think he did it because he felt like if he didn't, then things would have gone even worse. If you want to claim that Shoddy is like effectively the villain, I suppose I can't really argue with that, but this is not a Rhea from Fire Emblem Three Houses situation, where she set so many things in motion and continues to make things worse and worse and worse and worse, because she refuses to fucking grow a goddamn motherfucking brain. Shoddy, by contrast, is trying to do right by everything, because it is very possible that he has made it so that it is possible for the world to be destroyed. But he is also attempting to arm Yugi with the knowledge he needs and making sure that every piece is in place so that Yugi has everything that he needs to stop the darkness should he choose to. And let's face it, Atem would choose to, because his vessel has been influencing him for 4 years, according to one of the versions. I forget which. I flipped back too far. It was Memoirs of the Pharaoh? Ah, yes. Yeah, here it was. It was actually The Intruder Part 1. and it was mentioned like to be 4 years, right? For 4 years, Atem's vessel has been influencing him. You're not gonna tell me that he's just evil the end. I don't care what any fucking whack job cult leader with an evil magic circle and a dark god named Doma, or a freaking YouTuber who has a giant hate boner for Atem will fucking tell me. He's not evil. But it doesn't mean he's not infallible. Sorry for getting a little heated there, but that's a stance I stand behind. Atem is not evil, but he needs Yugi to temper him. And he has always needed Yugi to temper him, and he has always made that crystal fucking clear. And of course, Shadi in both versions says the light of hope is on its way. And of course, he's referring to Yugi with his real name. And we will understand that name is Atem and what that name can do in the very next episode. Until then, this is Blue Wolf Alex of the Lore Walkers, signing out of another 4 great episodes of this wonderful arc. I'll see you next time for the end of Zorc. Blue Wolf Alex of the Lore Walkers is signing out. Have a good one. Stay tuned.